Have to allow a president, any president, to have immunity.
When Donald Trump made his plea for immunity from prosecution, most believed it was fanciful, that America's sacrosanct principle that no one, not even the president, was above the law, would ensure he would ultimately be held accountable. But in its ruling yesterday, some say the Supreme Court handed Mr. Trump exactly what he asked for: absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for his official acts and assumed immunity for pretty much everything else. Only a president's private acts are open to prosecution, a decision that President Biden said essentially upended the nearly 250-year-old status quo.
For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States.
The immediate impact of the ruling means the January the 6th case will now not likely be heard before the election, while the trial judge is forced to unpick what bits of Trump's actions constitute official or private acts that can actually be prosecuted. And Trump's sentencing in his hush money trial, which was supposed to happen next week, will now likely be delayed after his lawyers claim the Supreme Court decision means his guilty verdict in that case should now be overturned.
So what we have in New York is a situation where a substantial number of official acts of the presidency, things that we believe are official acts, were used as evidence to support the charges in that New York trial. We believe that that corrupts that trial. That indicates that that jury verdict needs to be overturned, and at the very least, we deserve a new trial.
The Supreme Court justices claim their ruling does not mean a US president is now above the law. But just look at the immediate impact of their momentous decision. Trump's lawyers are already trying to have his hush money case thrown out, and his other criminal cases will doubtlessly be delayed and could even be derailed altogether as a result of their ruling. But beyond that, there's a numbing concern that the insulation the Supreme Court's decision has given Trump will embolden him to act without fear or impunity in a second term if he wins the election in November.
It's incredibly dangerous. It creates a very dangerous precedent that a person who is seated in the office of the president is essentially immune from any and all prosecution. If he's successful in this election, we can expect that these cases will essentially go away and he will not be held to account.
President Nixon famously resigned before he was criminally convicted in the Watergate scandal of the 1970s.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
By definition.
Exactly.
But his claim several years later that a president enjoyed blanket immunity had no basis in law then. Now the Supreme Court seems to have come to the same conclusion, with all its chilling implications.
Siobhan Kennedy reporting. Well, joining me now is Professor Sarah Churchwell, a writer and professor of American culture and humanities from the University of London, and from Blue River, Colorado, the broadcaster Mark McKinnon, who advised President George W. Bush and Senator John McCain. Welcome to you both. Sarah, let me start with you. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
The fact that the District Attorney of Manhattan has delayed the sentencing that everyone, the whole world, was waiting for, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells us exactly what kind of chilling effect this is going to have and how far-reaching the consequences are going to be, how it throws everything up in the air, everything in an incredibly volatile situation anyway, where everything was to play for. Now, even decisions that have been made can be revisited, unraveled. Everything has to be second-guessed. The fundamental thing that the court did yesterday, well, I mean, it did a lot of fundamental things, but one of its shortest-term impacts will be that it's sending everything back to lower courts to re-adjudicate, to redecide, to decide what's official, what isn't official, what's core, what isn't core. And so now they've decided that with this decision, they also need to reconsider that. Although under what arguments paying off a porn star hush money for, in order to, as that court determined, in order to affect the outcome of the election, how that could be the core or official capacity of an official who wasn't yet an official.
It's a good question.
Quite mysterious.
Mark McKinnon, is Trump getting his way here? Is everything that could hurt him being kicked into the very long grass?
Well, exactly right. After a couple of 100 years of fooling around with this project called democracy, it turns out maybe we just wanted to have a king after all, because that's what Trump wants. He wants to knock down all the executive barriers to being president. And now he has, effectively, because of the Supreme Court. He's getting everything he wants. And as just noted, all his legal overhang is going to be, at the very least, delayed beyond the election. So he's got a clear field now, and that's why I'm so concerned about Joe Biden being the nominee of the Democratic Party, because he was behind Trump before the debates, had a disastrous debate, and he's well behind now. And I just think if Joe Biden doesn't withdraw, he's going to lose.
Right. Just on the perils for the Republic, Joe Biden yesterday gave an address from the White House in which he more or less said, you know, this is high danger for America. I mean, is the Republic in danger?
Well, sure it is. I mean, I think we saw just how much danger on January 6th. We saw an insurrection that was approved by the president at the time. And a lot of this legal back and forth has been over that event. And now it's clear that Donald Trump may never be prosecuted for that insurrection, and it will have free rein to do that again if he so chooses to. But he may not have to, given the license that he has now.
Sarah, I mean, we saw with the Roe v. Wade decision, you know, the abortion rights in America, when that was overturned by this Supreme Court, it massively backfired in the midterm elections. Trump's candidates lost votes, you know, one after another because of that. Could the same thing happen this time?
It absolutely could. Look, and a lot of people are calling for this in the last 24 hours, saying that without question, the Democrats have to run as a body on this issue. This is about running to rein in the Supreme Court, whether we have to expand the court, whether they can be impeached. These are things. None of these solutions can be achieved without real political power. We need congressional majorities and we need the presidency in order to have any hope of reining in what is indeed a rogue Supreme Court, way out of step with public opinion in the United States. And something else that I think needs to be said, I mean, it's worth saying that Mark and I are on very different sides of the political aisle normally, but I think we are in very strong agreement on this issue for this reason, which is that I've been reading this described as the conservatives on the bench making this ruling. This is not a conservative ruling. This is a radical ruling. It's an extremist ruling by any reasonable definition of that.
Mark, Sonia Sotomayor, one of the liberal justices on the Supreme Court, wrote an incredibly stinging minority opinion yesterday, which ended with the words, you know, immune, immune, immune. In other words, you know, more or less taking Trump's word, his own word once, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. That used to be a joke, but not anymore.
Well, he said his voters could do that. Now he's saying the Supreme Court will let him do that. So that's the problem. I only disagree in the sense that my worry is that Democrats and Biden have been over and over again using this as an example to say, oh, voters, you don't understand how grave the threat is. I think voters do get it. I think they understand. I think they've understood for a while, and that's why Biden isn't up to the job. Voters have looked at Trump, they recognize the threat, and they looked at Joe Biden in that debate. They tuned in to see if he looked 80 and he looked 90, and now they're really worried. And I suspect there's going to be a strong movement in the next couple of weeks to replace him.
Right, that's a good point. But Sarah Churchill, Biden has always been going on about the perils of Trump to democracy. He gave a very eloquent statement last night. He was reading it off an auto cue, which is a bit easier than doing it in debate. Will he now feel emboldened to carry on, do you think?
I don't think so. I think he's going to be under even more pressure. I think that pressure is going to escalate. There was a poll that just came out showing that now, actually, Harris, for the first time, Harris is starting to surpass Biden in a head-to-head against Trump. We haven't seen that before. Kamala's been trailing in hypothetical polls, but she's starting to take the lead.
But
now,
do you think he will bow to that pressure?
I think if the pressure is great enough, he will, yes.
But what does that mean, great enough?
Well, it's going to mean governors coming together. It's going to mean Senate leaders coming together. It's going to mean the Democrat machinery coming together and saying, you have to stand down. Will that happen? I don't know.
What about the Biden family coming together, Mark? You know, Jill Biden is apparently encouraging him to carry on and on and on.
But things have just changed massively.
Sorry.
I'll just note that there's a significant development just in the last half hour. Lloyd Doggett, who is a longtime progressive member, a Democratic member of Congress, came out. He's the first member to call for Biden to step down. He said, I represent the district of Lyndon Johnson, and I know how hard that decision was for Johnson. And I know it's hard for Biden, but he needs to do it. And that's a big deal. I think the dam's starting to break.
So who do you think is going to, if he is going to be replaced, I'll ask you the same question in a minute, Sarah, who do you think, Mark, will replace Joe Biden?
Listen, I think almost anybody with a pulse in the Democratic Party will be better. Nobody was excited about Joe Biden. 72% of the country, including Democrats, didn't think he was healthy enough to be running. So, listen, I know people have concerns about Harris, but I think Harris will be, as just noted, stronger than Biden, and she'll have a vice president if she's at the top of the ticket. And it could be any number of people, but. As I said, I think it'll create a sense of enthusiasm, excitement. Yes, it's going to be chaotic, but at least people will be excited again.
Will you bet, just in one word, will you bet your hat then on Biden not being on the ticket?
I don't think he's going to be on the ticket. I don't think he can be, or the Democrats lose.
Sarah, what do you think?
I think my opinion on this has shifted dramatically in the last 24 hours, and I think that's going to be true for a lot of people as well. As you say, the situation is going to be chaotic no matter what happens, and we need to have. I think we do. We need to. I think he is going to have to pull out actually, and I have been. Really struggling with
trying
this
to get
one.
into his mind.
I've just been really struggling with this one because I think that there's also a lot of reasons for not replacing him. But I do think that we're going to end up with Harris and somebody like a Newsom or a Whitmer. Yeah, I think that's probably what we're looking at.
We'll be watching that space. Sarah Churchill, Mark McKinnon, thanks very much to both of you.